licence. There's plenty of jobs in Western Australia, so come west.
Thank you, Senator Brockman. It's being 2 p.m. Questions without notice. Senator Walsh.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. Yesterday, the minister asserted that, and I quote, "Every aged care worker who wants access to a vaccine right now has access to a vaccine right now." Does the minister stand by his statement?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Yes, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Walsh, for the question. Yes, I do stand by my statement.
Senator Walsh, supplementary question.
Yesterday, the Victorian government was forced to stop bookings for the Pfizer vaccine, including for aged care workers, due to constraints of the supply of the Commonwealth program. Can the minister confirm that not all aged care workers who want a vaccine right now can access one?
Order. Order. I'll call Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Walsh, for the question. And I do confirm that they have availability. And so I have a text message from Minister Foley from Victoria, who I contacted when I saw a story in The Guardian earlier in the day that was reporting that that was the case. And Minister Foley says, "Not right, they are wrong. They still have priority. It's nonsense. We will get onto them." So, Minister Foley, Mr President, Minister Foley is going to
order.
Mr President,
Order.
aged care workers continue to have access. In fact, they have priority access directly from the Victorian Minister, who I have to say I thank for his cooperation, and also my conversation earlier with Minister Donnellan. We continue to work very, very cooperatively with the Victorian government to ensure
Senator
the rollout.
Colbeck,
And
time
the workforce
for the
in aged
answer
care
has
remain.
expired. Senator Walsh, a final supplementary question.
Yesterday, this minister conceded the Morrison government has had to firstly reassess our vaccine rollout, secondly again repivot the rollout, and finally reset the vaccine rollout for the aged care workforce on a number of occasions. Given the Victorian government's decision as a result of supply constraints of the Commonwealth, has the Morrison government had to reassess, repivot and reset its rollout yet again?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President.
Order.
The problem of reading a set question after not listening to the answers to the previous two questions, Mr President, as I've clearly articulated and had confirmed by the Victorian Minister, the workers in Victoria continue to have priority access to vaccines. It is a pity, Mr President, that the senator didn't take notice of the first questions that we answered. We continue to work. We continue to work very cooperatively with the Victorian government in the interests of getting aged care workers vaccinated, and we will continue to do that, Mr President. It is a pity that the Labor Party here in Canberra continue to try and undermine the confidence in the vaccination rollout process for their own political purposes, Mr President. They continue to make these disgraceful accusations, Mr President, that are simply not
Senator
true.
Wong, there is too much noise in the chamber. There is too much noise in the chamber. I was repeatedly calling senators to order. Order. Senator Wong. Senator Wong, please. Senator Henderson. Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister please explain to the Senate how the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement enhances and strengthens Australia's economic recovery?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Smith for his question. I know that Senator Smith, like all coalition senators, but perhaps none more so than Senator Smith, welcomes the in-principle agreement of the Australia-United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement. And indeed, Senator Wong, I have no doubt that Senator Smith will be sending a tariff-free bottle of Australian craft-made gin for Her Majesty any time soon. But seriously, Mr President, I am pleased to confirm that Australia and the UK have reached in-principle agreement in relation to this free trade agreement. A free trade agreement that will once again deliver more jobs for Australians, more opportunities for Australian exporters, and bring both our countries closer together in this current strategic, challenging environment. This was an agreement negotiated from scratch in record time, reflecting the close affinity of our two nations and the robust industrial logic of the agreement that has been delivered. This free trade agreement is the right deal for both Australia and the UK, providing each of our nations with greater access to a range of high-quality products, greater access for businesses and workers, greater access for quality services exchange, driving economic growth and job creation. It is significant that the UK turned to Australia to negotiate its first bilateral agreement since leaving the European Union. The UK is already Australia's fifth largest trading partner in 2019-20, with two-way trade worth $36.7 billion, the second largest source of investment stock, valued at $738 billion. And pleasingly, under this agreement, the UK will liberalise Australian imports into the UK, with 99% of Australian goods set to enter the UK duty-free. This is good news for our farmers, our businesses and Australian jobs.
Senator Smith, a supplementary question.
Mr President, can the minister advise how this free trade agreement demonstrates the coalition government's broader commitment to free trade?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, this agreement does build on a tremendous record of delivering expanded trade opportunities for Australian exporters, for Australian farmers and small businesses across the nation. Under the coalition, 10 free trade agreements have been concluded, growing the coverage of Australian exports that enjoy preferential access into international export markets from around 26% of exports when we were elected to office to now around 75% of Australia's exports that will enjoy that market advantage in international export markets as a result of these trade agreements. These free trade agreements with our major trading partners, be they the North Asian partners, be they the recently concluded and entered into force agreement with Indonesia, be they the multi-party agreements such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or indeed our close partnership with our Pacific Island partners, all of them enhancing opportunities for economic growth across these partners.
Senator Smith, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister outline to the Senate what are the benefits of free trade to Australia and to every Australian?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, enhanced export opportunities create more jobs for more Australians. All of the research shows they generate more high-paying Australian jobs and, in doing so, help to create the business and economic strength and resilience to fund the essential services that all Australians rely upon. Australian businesses that export on average hire 23% more staff, pay 11% higher wages and have labour productivity 13% higher than non-exporters. Trade of goods and services represented some 40% of Australia's GDP in 2020. We have delivered time and again in terms of expanding the choice and range of opportunities for Australian exporters. Our government has made sure that we expand those opportunities across our near region of ASEAN nations, across our broader region in North Asia, across the Pacific with new trade agreements, providing access to Mexico and Canada for the first time ever, now to the UK, and we aspire to the EU and other agreements to be struck in the months and years to come.
Senator Carr.
Mr President, my question, without notice, is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. And given that the minister yesterday confirmed, and I quote, the Australian government is responsible for the vaccination rollout of residents and workers in residential aged care, I'd ask, can the minister explain why the Morrison government has failed to put in place any system to track COVID-19 vaccination of aged care workers?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Well, Senator Carr, thank you for the question, Mr President. It's not true that we don't have a system to track the vaccination of aged care workers. We do have a system to track the vaccination of aged care workers, Mr President. There's a portal that came live a week and a half ago. It's compulsory as of yesterday for aged care providers to report into that portal.
Mr. President.
Order.
As we advised the Senate Committee had estimates a couple of weeks ago. So, Mr. President, there is a system in place. There is a system in place to provide to report work of vaccinations for COVID-19. It has been developed as a part of our realignment of the system of vaccination of aged care workers, Mr. President, and we will continue to report those figures publicly, as we've indicated we would at estimates.
Order. Order. Senator Carr is on his feet. Senator Carr, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask, why did the Morrison government repeatedly reject offers to work cooperatively with the private sector with technology enabling the tracking of COVID-19 vaccinations and aged care prior to the establishment of the portal?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr. President, I don't believe that the government has actually rejected any offers. We speak to a lot of we speak to a lot of providers of technology to do a number of things. I've had a number of conversations with providers of technology with respect to worker registration, for example, and we continue on a number of occasions and a number of different providers. Some of those providers have subsequently come back to us suggesting that their worker registration process might assist us with some of the other things that we were looking to achieve, Mr. President. We continue to have those discussions, Mr. President, but of course we have committed as a part of our Royal Commission response to a workforce registration process. We have committed to that, and that will be implemented in conjunction with the sector. But what we haven't done is we haven't gone to any private sector proprietary businesses to take up their particular systems. We're looking to develop a system that provides for registration of the workforce more generally, Mr. President, and one of the features of that workforce registration scheme that we are putting in place could be vaccination.
Order. There's Senator Carr, a final supplementary question.
With 84% of the tragic and deadly COVID-19 outbreaks in Victorian residential aged care facilities were actually from infected staff members, why, Minister, did you not heed the warnings of those private sector companies, and you now say you are looking to, in their Office of Assistance? Why should older Australians have any confidence, Minister, that you can actually help keep them safe?
Senator Carr. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I completely reject the premise of Senator Carr's question. It's factually incorrect, Mr. President. We continue.
Order.
Mr. President, we continue to work continuously to support senior Australians to ensure that they have access to vaccines, that the workforce continue to have access to vaccines, and that we, importantly, ensure that the aged care residents are vaccinated. And as of yesterday, Mr. President, over 94% of aged care providers have seen 2 visits of vaccinators to provide the doses. 100% of aged care providers have had a first visit, and in fact the figure now is 147,879 residents have been vaccinated, Mr. President.
Senator
so we
Colbeck,
continue
time
our
for the
work
answer
in
has
support
expired. Time for the answer has expired. Senator Wong, you're seeking the call.
Yes, I seek the call. I seek leave to table the answer to the question on notice confirming that 84% of the tragic and deadly COVID-19 outbreaks in Victorian facilities were from a staff member.
Granted. No, it hasn't been.
This is the fact.
Senator Wong, please. Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to Minister Ruston, representing the Minister for Resources. The G7 said earlier this week that genuine climate action requires countries to stop giving public subsidies to fossil fuels by 2025. And the International Energy Agency has said there should be no new coal, oil or gas projects to prevent climate disaster. Given this clear message from our international trading partners and experts, why is this government intent on opening up a climate bomb and handing $250,000 in public money to allow the Northern Territory Labor government to frack the the Beetaloo Basin, and opening up acreage that would allow new offshore oil and gas wells near the 12 Apostles?
The Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Waters, for your question. Well, first and foremost, the government, the Morrison-McCormack government, is absolutely committed to make sure that we work with the Australian public to make sure that we have an energy mix in this country that, first of all, is reliable and affordable, but at the same time that we meet our international obligations as well as protecting our environment. And we actually believe, Senator Waters, that we can do all of those things at the same time. You refer to a number of projects. As an example, the project in Victoria that you're referring to, or offshore in Victoria. I mean, clearly we already have independent regulators that have processes in place in which to assess, to make sure that any project that is undertaken in our amazing Australian environment is protected in the process. But we also have resources that are owned by the Australian people. These resources are for the benefit of all Australians, and as long as they are extracted in a mechanism and a manner in which the environment is protected, then every Australian deserves to be able to benefit from the benefits of being able to get access to those resources. So in the case of the Victorian offshore program that you're referring to, of course NOPSEMA is the independent regulator, and they will make sure they go through their robust and independent processes to make sure that any exploration, which is what you're referring to, that is undertaken in a manner that is consistent with the protection of Australia's environment. So, I mean, we have been very clear as a government that we believe that we have multiple obligations to the Australian public for cheap, reliable and accessible power, but we also have an obligation to our international requirement on carbon emissions, and we have an obligation to make sure that we protect our environment, our very precious environment, but we will do so in a manner in which we can extract the resources that are the property of all Australians, and all Australians deserve to benefit from
Senator
them.
Ruston. Senator Waters, supplementary question.
And the Northern Territory inquiry into fracking said there should be full informed consent from traditional owners before any exploration or fracking takes place, given the impacts on cultural heritage, water resources and access to land. Traditional owners from lands covered by the Empire Energy licence area in the Beetaloo are in the building today, saying that they have not been properly consulted or given their consent. How can the minister justify handing out public money for projects that do not have the consent of traditional owners?
Senator Ruston. Order.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Waters, for your continued for your other next question. First and foremost, there is an absolutely required process by which the government and its instrumentalities have to go through to make sure appropriate consultation is taken place, to make sure that everybody who has an interest in a particular project has the opportunity to be heard. Now, we are not in any way suggesting that any of those processes are going to be circumnavigated. They will be thoroughly adhered to and gone through, and that includes consultation with all of the people who are impacted by any of these developments, including the Beetaloo Basin development that you're referring to in the Northern Territory. I mean, the Beetaloo Basin is a very, very important resource for Australia, but I also understand that it is a very important issue for many Australians, and that's why we have robust processes in place to make sure that they are protected, that people's interests are able to be heard, and broad consultation will be undertaken to ensure everybody's interests are heard.
Senator Ruston. Senator Waters, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, President. One of the biggest investors in the Beetaloo Basin is Empire Energy, run by Paul Espy, chair of the Liberal Party's Menzies Centre, who has donated nearly $250,000 to the Liberal Party in recent years. Other significant players include Origin, Santos, Gemini and billionaire Gina Reinhardt.
Order on my right, so I can hear the question. Senator Waters, continue.
Thank you, Chair. Other significant players include Origin, Santos, Gemini and billionaire Gina Reinhardt, all donors and friends of the Liberal Party. Why is the government handing out public money to its donor mates against the advice of—
Senator Waters. Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, first and foremost, I reject the underlying premise of the accusations that are being made by Senator Waters. The decisions in relation to the exploration and the extraction of valuable resources that belong to the Australian public are undertaken by independent and thorough means. The importance of this sector to Australia cannot be understated. The importance to our rural and regional communities because of the economic development, because of the jobs that are created, but the broader impact that it provides to the Australian economy cannot be understated. But to suggest that there is anything apart from a robust, transparent, defensible process that is undertaken to ensure that the extraction of these particular resources on behalf of every Australian is anything but that is completely and utterly false. And so I would suggest that that the importance of making sure that we continue to meet all of our obligations, we continue to consult, but we continue to have a transparent process is absolutely there for every Australian to see, and I don't know why you can't see it either.
Senator Ruston. Senator Wong, were you seeking to table? No. Okay. Senator Bragg.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to Senator Payne, the Minister representing the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. Will the Minister please update the Senate on yesterday's historic announcement that Australia and the UK have an in-principle agreement on an FTA? And what does this mean for Australia?
The Minister representing the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Bragg for his question, because it was an historic announcement last night in London, Mr President, between Prime Ministers Morrison and Johnson agreeing to the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement that will deliver more Australian jobs and new opportunities for our exporters. It's going to bring access to a greater range of products, of greater access for businesses and workers, and more opportunities for Australian producers and farmers in the UK market. It is about creating new opportunities and jobs for business by eliminating tariffs on each other's goods and removing the red tape that slows trade down, by enhancing pathways for workers and young people to work in both countries, by making it easier for our service companies and professionals to do business in each other's markets, and deepening our already very strong investment ties. In fact, the Australia-UK FTA is Australia's most ambitious free trade agreement with any country other than New Zealand. Both countries have made commercially significant commitments that will strengthen our diversification and export-focused COVID-19 recovery. The ambitious bilateral free trade agreement will also help pave the way for the UK's accession to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, furthering our cooperation within the CPTPP on a prosperous and secure Indo-Pacific. We have sent the world a very strong signal that we are trading nations that believe in democracy, open markets, high standards and the rules-based global trading system. This deal delivers a strong message about the strength and importance of this relationship between Australia and the United Kingdom, and it opens a new chapter in the long and close history between our two nations.
Senator Bragg, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister. How is the Morrison government working to further diversify Australia's exports?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Bragg for his supplementary question, because we know that free and open trade will continue to drive economic growth as we emerge from the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the Coalition government is supporting Australian exporters to compete freely and fairly and securely. In fact, in last month's budget, we also announced significant new support to Australian exporters to ensure they can expand and diversify their markets as widely as possible. Despite COVID-19, Australia recorded a record trade surplus of $73 billion in 2020, up from $68 billion in 2019. Since this government was elected in 2013, Mr President, the percentage of our trade covered by FTAs has grown from 26% to what will be 75% once the UK FTA takes effect. We welcome every opportunity to further diversify our exports, because the more diversified your exports are, the better placed you are for the peaks and troughs of global commodity trade.
Senator Bragg, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister. How is the Morrison government supporting a rules-based global trading system?
Senator Payne.
Mr President, the Australia-UK FTA will strengthen our post-COVID-19 economic recovery, while signalling our very strong commitment to the global trade and international rules-based order. The Coalition is working to keep global markets open and trade functioning, including through bodies such as the WTO, the G20 and APEC. We support a strong, effective World Trade Organisation, which is why both Minister Tehan and I have met this year with the WTO's new Director-General, Dr Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, in Geneva. Australia is working in close partnership with the WTO. We're leading a Cairns Group effort to tackle distorting domestic support in agriculture. We continue to invest in and advocate for WTO reform to ensure a strong system of rules to secure the rights of Australian exporters, to provide opportunities for our businesses to grow and to create jobs for the future.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister confirm disability support workers were classified as Group 1A, the highest priority in the vaccine rollout?
The Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Brown for that question. We have some very good news in terms of the progress now of the rollout, both for NDIS participants and also for workers and their primary carers. Workers are in 1B and are eligible and are all eligible now for vaccinations, and in fact are indeed becoming vaccinated.
Senator Brown, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister. How many disability support workers have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. For all disability workforce, we don't have a central register because in the past we haven't had a need for such a register for a workforce that is quite transient and is also crossover with aged care and also
Sorry, Senator Reynolds, please. I have on my left. I have during question time repeatedly called senators to order. I'm having trouble again hearing a minister's answer. I would appreciate not being interjected on when I'm asking people to abide by the rules the chamber sets for itself. I don't make them up. Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. And I can confirm that NDIS workers are not required to disclose to their provider or to the Commonwealth whether they have or have not been vaccinated. In the same way, they are not required and obligated to disclose a medical condition. However, irrespective of their vaccination status, they are required to follow public health orders and are bound by workplace health and safety laws in relevant states and territories.
Senator Brown, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. I would ask that the minister go back and check which group disability support workers are classified as, and also on what date it is 1A, as I understand it, not 1B. And what date will all disability support workers who want a vaccine be fully vaccinated against COVID-19?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, Senator Brown, I don't need to go back and check. It is in 1B. We recently made sure that all NDIS participants, their workforce and their carers were in 1B, and in fact all are eligible now, and there are many. There are the four main channels to get vaccinated, and we've also set up additional hubs based out of providers. Senator Brown, the answer is really up to the workforce themselves. They have the opportunity to voluntarily be vaccinated, and when they choose to get vaccinated, they can be.
Order. Senator Davey.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston. Will the minister please outline how the new free trade agreement between Australia and the United Kingdom will provide our primary producers with new opportunities to export the world's best food, fibre and rice overseas?
The Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thanks Senator Davey for her question, because like you, Senator Davey, I know that Australian farmers will be the big winners for the free trade agreement that was negotiated between our Prime Minister and Prime Minister Johnson overnight. And the deal will open up such an amazing new set of avenues for our farmers and the broader agricultural sector, because The agriculture sector has always been terribly important for the Australian economy, and none more so than it is at the moment as we recover from the COVID pandemic. This free trade agreement is a very comprehensive agreement. It's high quality and it's mutually beneficial for both of our countries, but most particularly for our agricultural sector. It will allow 99% of Australian goods entering the UK to be duty-free, and that includes the immediate elimination of tariffs on wine, which means a lot to the area that I come from, and rice, which means a lot to the area that you come from, Senator Davey. So beef tariffs will be eliminated over 10 years. Right now, we'll get immediate access to 35 tonnes of beef, and that quota will rise to 110,000 tonnes. Sheep meat tariffs will be eliminated after 10 years as well, which means immediate access to 25,000 tonnes, which will rise to 75,000 tonnes. Sugar tariffs will be eliminated over 8 years, dairy tariffs over 5 years. This agreement absolutely means that our farmers now have another new and exciting market for which they can sell in their amazing, high-quality Australian produce. And not only that, Senator Davey, but they will be able to access markets that are actually paying really good prices and understand what the quality of Australian produce is all about. So it has never been more important for Australian farmers to have a diversity of markets of which they can access, and this new trade agreement is a win for us. It's a win for our country, but it's most particularly a win for our rural economies.
Senator Davey, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Will the minister outline the importance of export opportunities like this free trade agreement for Australian primary producers in meeting the industry's goal of $100 billion of agricultural production by 2030?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, this year, farm-gate prices and farm-gate production is set to reach an all-time high of $66.3 billion. And of that, $47 billion will be generated because of our exporting of our fantastic primary produce. We know that we grow amazing food, but 80 million people, not just here in Australia but around the world, are fed by Australian producers. 1.6 million people in Australia are employed by the agricultural sector through its supply chain, and more than 334,000 Australians are employed directly in our agricultural sector. This is fantastic news for the whole of Australia, but most particularly to the areas, the regional areas that support our agricultural sector. We know our primary producers are absolutely first class. They're innovative, they're forward-thinking, and they're always prepared to have a go. So this free trade agreement helps them be able to help themselves to support Australia.
Senator Davey, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. And how is the Liberal and National government supporting primary producers to take advantage of the new export opportunities such as the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, we absolutely, as a government, the Morrison-McCormack government, understand the importance not just of sustaining our agricultural sector but building it, because it is such an important part of the Australian economy. So we've invested nearly $100 million in the current budget, in the 21-22 budget, to make sure that we are providing the agricultural sector with the supports and tools so they can take advantage of the opportunities that are presented by these new free trade agreements, such as the one that has been struck in the last 24 hours. We want to transform the way that we support our agricultural sector, particularly around export services and support for exporters. The Busting Congestion for Agricultural Exporters package continues to modernise and streamline our systems. The package will also generate more than $200 million in other benefits for the agricultural sector by 2030. And as part of the Agri-Business Expansion Initiative, we're supporting 2,000 agri-food exporters through the Austrade-led Accelerate
Senator
program.
Ruston, time has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to Senator Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister told the G7 summit that Australia will join the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, and that Australia is committed to protecting a combined 30% of domestic land and ocean by 2030. But of course the goal of the HAC, Minister, is to protect 30% land plus 30% ocean. Isn't this just more trickery from your government to global commitments, just like wanting to use carryover credits to meet Paris targets and commitments.
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I thank Senator Hanson-Young at least for the opportunity to note further some of the successes of the Prime Minister's visit to the G7 summit and associated meetings. We've had the opportunity in question time today, of course, to highlight the benefits of the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement, but that wasn't the only agreement that the Prime Minister signed as part of his work overseas. The Prime Minister indeed made other commitments. Those included hydrogen cooperation commitments with Germany and with Singapore as part of our technology roadmap and our commitment to engaging with international partners around how it is we drive down emissions in the future through new technologies that Australia can play a leadership role in. We signed an agreement with Japan in relation to decarbonisation, Mr. President.
Order. Senator Hanson-Young on a point of order.
Mr. President, I'd ask you to bring the minister to the question. It was in relation to the government's commitment to the HAC and the trickery and accounting that the Prime Minister has used.
Senator Hanson-Young, it was a particularly broad question, and I've ruled before that when questions include contentious phrases, ministers have more discretion in answering. I'm listening carefully to the minister, but specific questions are easier to make rulings around direct relevance. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, I was just referencing an agreement. I would have thought the Greens would have quite welcomed the agreement between Australia and Japan in relation to cooperation on decarbonisation, building on those other agreements that the Prime Minister entered into whilst overseas. Now, Mr. President, Senator Hanson-Young has asked particularly about oceans, and of course Australia has responsibility for some of the broadest reach of oceans in the world, and that's why in the recent budget our government released a further $100 million as part of an oceans package to further strengthen our leadership in relation to marine management and ocean protection. That includes some $30 million to restore coastal marine ecosystems, particularly those systems such as mangroves, seagrasses and tidal marshes, but also some $40 million, Mr. President, to expand the marine park network into the Indian Ocean and protect some 45%, Mr. President, of Australian waters, as well as extension in particular to incorporate sea country into Indigenous protected areas across some 9 locations, further expanding not only those networks of protected areas but especially of Indigenous
has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I note that the minister didn't reference the 30% need for protection of domestic land. And isn't it true that if these weak environment laws that the Prime Minister wants pushed through this place this week, if they were to pass the Senate, there's no way you could meet this commitment? The Prime Minister's just signed up to something he knows he will never be able to reach.
Senator Birmingham.
Mr. President, what Senator Hanson-Young describes as weak, our government is determined to make sure are effective. Our definition of effective isn't to simply have laws in place that are a quagmire of bureaucracy and stop everything. Our definition of effective as a government is to make sure that indeed they protect the nationally significant environmental assets that need protection, but they also facilitate development and opportunity across the Australian economy that jobs depend upon. Now, again, Mr. President, in the recent budget we outlined some close to $30 million in further support around Australia's environment laws and particularly around the operation of the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, funding to ensure the operation of an independent Environment Assurance Commissioner, to pursue a pilot regional plan for priority development region in partnership with a state or territory, to further support stakeholder engagement in relation to Indigenous cultural heritage. Things I would expect the Greens to welcome some of them, but of course that they never
expired. Senator Hanson-Young, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Australia commit to a target of zero extinction, or is the Prime Minister intent on giving everything to the mining companies and nothing for the koalas?
Senator Birmingham.
And Mr. President, for the Greens and particularly for Senator Hanson-Young, we know that there's the YouTube moment that will be sliced and diced into a little clip that will be used, and that it's all about the cheap grab, the cheap stunt, and never, of course, about the serious policy work or analysis as to how you achieve the objectives of absolutely protecting Australia's biodiversity, of protecting Australia's wildlife, but also enabling business to be able to operate in a commercially competitive way in Australia in a very competitive global landscape. The types of approach our government seeks to bring, following the very thorough review of the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, is all about ensuring that we have effective environmental protections in place, that we work in a more harmonised way with the states and territories for the application of those protections, but that we don't have a quagmire of bureaucracy that prohibits projects from even getting off the ground, as the Greens seem to prefer.
Ciccone. Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds. At the recent round of Senate estimates less than 2 weeks ago, we heard that out of the 22,285 people living with a disability, only 335 of them had both doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, why were only 1.6% of people living in a residential disability setting fully vaccinated, despite being in the priority 1A for the vaccine rollout?
The Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank the senator for that question. The issue of vaccinations for people with disabilities, particularly those on the NDIS, their carers and also their support workers, has been of great importance to me and a great focus in my first couple of months in this job. So we have actually had a significant increase over the last few weeks with the new measures that we've been implementing. We've now got many more hubs, particularly based at providers, and again I thank very much particularly the SIL providers for opening up their facilities around the nation and providing vaccinations both for participants, for their carers and also for workers. Since the last lot of figures that I've published, we now have just under 50,000 NDIS participants who've had at least one dose of the vaccine, which is an increase of 18,700 since just the 25th of May. Now, this includes 9,500 people with disability living in residential aged care, or people eligible who are living in residential disability residential care under Phase 1A of the scheme. And that's now it's an increase of over 3,300 since the 25th of May. So we are making significant inroads, and again it's due to a fantastic effort between the Department of Health, between our department, and also now with the providers, who, as I've said, I'm very grateful for their assistance in speeding up the rollout.
Senator Ciccone, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank the Minister. Minister, Rosemary Simon, whose daughter lives in a group home in Albury, has said on ABC Radio Melbourne recently, and I quote, "Nobody has been able to give me any information for months, and they're not to be able to get through the 1800 number. The lack of information has just been appalling. If it's not as if the federal government hasn't had time to plan for this." She goes on to describe the Morrison government's vaccine rollout as, quote, non-existent. Is she right?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much for that question, and I would advise all Australians living with disabilities, their carers, their family members and also their workers that there are many avenues now for them to receive vaccinations. The main 4 channels that everybody, including the family that you have just mentioned, Senator, they can do. There's now more than 4,600 primary care sites that they can go to. There are the state and territory operated clinics, which are now more than 600 across the nation. There's the Commonwealth InReach and hubs, which are now being provided, as I've said, through NDIS providers who are making their facilities available, and they in particular have the transportation to assist to bring people in and meet their special requirements according to their disability. GPs are now doing InReach, and in some states pharmacies are now also doing InReach. So there are now many channels, and that information is available on the Department of Health's website, and it's also available via the NDIA website.
Senator Ciccone, a final supplementary question.
Minister, on what date will all Australians living in a residential disability setting be fully vaccinated against COVID-19?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, for that. My hope is as quickly as possible, but as this is a voluntary, vaccination is voluntary. Ultimately, we've now made many more channels available for people with disability, their carers and their support workers to get vaccinated, either within their home or other facilities that they are living in, or that they can go or be transported to many facilities. So we have the channels available, we have the means of providing vaccination, but ultimately, under this scheme, we cannot force anybody to be vaccinated.
Senator McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for International Development and the Pacific, Senator Selja. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the highly successful Pacific Labour Scheme and Seasonal Worker Program is helping Australian farmers to harvest their crops, which is protecting jobs and regional communities through the impacts of COVID-19, as well as supporting economies within our region?
Minister for International Development and the Pacific, Senator Selja.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank Senator McLaughlin for his question. I note his home state of South Australia's wonderful leadership in supporting Pacific labour mobility. Now, firstly, as we all respond to COVID-19 and look at economic recovery, I want to reiterate that there has never been a more important time for Australia to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners across the Pacific. The Seasonal Worker Program and Pacific Labour Scheme have been instrumental in helping to address critical workforce shortages in rural and regional communities. There are now more than 12,000 Pacific and Timorese workers in Australia, with another 27,000 in the work-ready pool. In fact, Pacific Labour has been the lifeblood for many Australian businesses and ensured fresh fruit and vegetables have reached our supermarkets and our tables. And the Australian government values the contribution that Pacific workers have made to our economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought into sharp focus workforce shortages in critical sectors, including agriculture, and highlighted the importance of Pacific labour. Since the restart of COVID-safe recruitment of Pacific workers in September 2020, more than 7,400 Pacific workers have arrived and supported our horticulture and meat processing sectors, and 2,700 further recruitments are currently being planned. More than 5,000 Pacific and Timorese workers stayed in Australia working during COVID. The Australian government is grateful to these thousands of Pacific and Timor-Leste workers for choosing to work in Australia, for helping Australian businesses in our time of need. They're far from home, far from their family and communities, from their one-talks, and I'd acknowledge the sacrifice they are making right now. And that these programs are delivering for Australian farmers, for Australian consumers and for our Pacific family. For our part, the Australian government is committed to the future of Pacific labour mobility and seeing workers and employers benefit from these highly successful programs.
Senator McLaughlin, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the Minister advise the Senate on how the coalition government is improving and streamlining Australia's labour mobility programs to further maximise the benefits of these initiatives for Australian businesses as well as Pacific workers as we recover from the pandemic?
Senator Selja.
Thank you, and I can. Last week, along with my fellow ministers Littleproud and Payne, we announced a public consultation process to streamline our Pacific labour mobility initiative. Now, our commitment is to ensure that Pacific labour mobility is sustainable and efficient into the future, and to position Pacific labour mobility for significant future growth. Through this redesign, we'll make it even easier to recruit Pacific workers to meet current and future workforce shortages, while also continuing to ensure the integrity of the programs and the welfare of workers. Now, worker welfare is absolutely paramount, and I can't stress this enough. Welfare and program integrity remains at the heart of our enhanced labour programs. But we also know that Pacific labour alone cannot fill the huge seasonal workforce shortages that our farmers and rural industries will experience beyond the pandemic. As we consider how to meet future workforce needs, we will ensure any new arrangements build on and complement the gold standard set by our Pacific labour mobility programs.
Senator Selja. Senator McLaughlin, a final supplementary question.
President, can the minister outline how these programs underpin our strong relationships with our Pacific and Timor-Leste family and the government's commitment to seeing these programs prosper and thrive into the future?
Senator Selja.
Thank you. The Seasonal Worker Program and Pacific Labour Scheme are the centrepiece of Australia's Pacific step-up and engagement in the region. The remittances sent home by Pacific workers are a key source of family and national income in the Pacific, and these will be even more integral to the pandemic recovery and future growth of Pacific economies. Now, through the streamlining of the programs, we're committed to growing Pacific labour mobility participation. Our Pacific and Timor-Leste partners should be confident that we remain committed to growing our Pacific labour programs. These initiatives are hugely beneficial for Australian farmers and our Pacific family, and the government's committed to building on this success. And we know from the great feedback from far north Queensland to Tasmania that the Pacific will continue to be priority partners for the Australian government and for Australian farmers for many years to come. It's disappointing the Labor Party seems opposed by the nature of their interjection, but our commitment to these highly successful programs—
Senator Seselja, please resume your seat. Senator O'Neill, I have called you to order repeatedly by name. I ask people to at least pause breaking the rules before they recommence. Senator Seselja.
Thank you. And unlike those opposite, it seems, our commitment to these highly successful programs and to the Pacific is absolutely steadfast.
Senator Kitching.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds. On the 11th of May this year, this minister was asked about the tragic death of 23-year-old Liam Danher, who died waiting for a seizure mat. The minister first claimed she personally had been in contact with Liam's father. Then she claimed she had offered to meet and been in touch with Liam's father, and then she admitted it was her office who had been in touch with Liam's father. Can the minister now clarify whether she has personally apologised to Liam's family, and if she has done so, when?
The Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And first and foremost, can I reiterate my condolences to Mr Danher's family. Any death of a child is always tragic. My Chief of Staff has been in contact reasonably regularly with Mr Danher's father, who the family has relocated interstate. So I've offered to meet with him, in fact both parents, at their convenience, and they have asked for me to wait until I have further information which will come from the outcome of the inquiry.
Senator, have you concluded your answer? Senator, sorry, the minister's concluded her answer. Senator Kitching, you have a supplementary question?
So why, after 78 days, has this minister failed to pick up the phone to personally apologise to Liam Danher's family? Why has she left it to her office?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. And as I've said, my Chief of Staff has been in contact with Mr Danher, and I have offered, and through my Chief of Staff, offered to either in person or on the phone talk with Mr Danher myself. And my understanding is he does want to talk to me, but when I've got answers that will come in the outcome of the investigation. So at that point, and at his request, that is when I will have contact with him directly, if he still wants to have that conversation.
Senator Kitching, a final supplementary question.
When asked how many thousands of taxpayer dollars the Morrison government spent on legal advice and lawyers to deny Liam his $445 seizure mat, the minister failed to answer and falsely claimed she had been in contact with Mr Danher personally. Remember that? Will the minister now be upfront with the Senate and answer that question?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. If my Chief of Staff does something on my behalf, then I consider that is the case. And I did, on further questioning, clarify that point, that it was in fact my staff.
Order.
Thank you.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Women's Economic Security, Senator Hume. Can the minister outline to the Senate what the Morrison government is doing to develop Australian women's jobs of the future?
The Minister for Women's Economic Security, Senator Hume.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Chandler for this very important question and for her enduring commitment to the prosperity and progress of Australian women, and particularly their economic security. As Australians on this and those on this side of the chamber know, the Morrison government is committed to seeing more Australians in jobs, and that is particularly so for Australian women. The best way to secure Australian women's economic the best way to secure Australian women's economic security is to ensure that the economy is strong and that there are plenty of jobs to go to. Now, at present, there are more Australians in jobs than ever before. There are more Australian jobs than there were before the COVID-19 pandemic began. In March 2021, women's employment, in fact, hit a record high. The women's workforce participation rate is now hovering around record highs. And what's more, the gender pay gap is at record lows, around 13.4%, which of course is considerably lower than the 17.4% that was observed during the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd Labor government. But, Mr President, we're not resting on our laurels. There is certainly more work to do. The Morrison government is particularly focused on policies that generate jobs in emerging industries, industries that require skills in technology, in science and engineering and maths, known as STEM, and particularly so for Australian women, for these are the better and higher-paying jobs of the future. Mr President, Australia's talent pool is too often limited by the underrepresentation of over half of Australia's population in STEM education and careers. We have such a highly educated workforce and a highly educated female population, in fact the most highly educated female population of any developed country, and yet there is a leaky pipeline and low representation of women in STEM. That's why in the 2021-22 budget, the Morrison government announced a $42.4 million investment to support women to secure higher legislation.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Chandler, a
Thank you, Mr.
question.
President. Can the minister advise the Senate of the anticipated effects of the government's measures?
Senator Hume.
Thank you, Mr President. Yes, I can talk about the more than 230 women who are going to pursue STEM scholarship programs through the Morrison government's announcements in the budget. In fact, this program will see more Australian women supported into the jobs of the future. The program builds on the Women in STEM cadetships and advanced apprenticeship program that were announced previously, providing support for more women to undertake university-level STEM qualifications. These scholarships are co-funded with industry and are industry-led in areas that are most important that industry have identified as most important to them, those fields of STEM with the highest potential to support future growth industries and better and higher paying jobs. For example, Mr President, in the medtech industry, which was identified as a national manufacturing priority in the Morrison government's modern manufacturing strategy. This is a critical field, particularly in light of the coronavirus. Now, most importantly, these measures create a bigger pipeline of women entering STEM careers, as well as increased number of role models and peer networks specifically for women.
Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister inform the Senate of the industry and community feedback on these measures?
Senator Hume.
Thank you again, Mr President. Yes, I certainly can. And matter of fact, I've visited very recently a number of organisations where the feedback to this program has been exceptional. A medtech organisation in Melbourne, SEER Medical, an innovative organisation which simplifies complex systems, medical systems, into technologies that people can benefit from in the comfort of their own homes. I also visited Cicada Innovations in Sydney and met the CEO there, Sally Ann Williams. Sally is a terrific role model for young women contemplating a career in STEM and was particularly supportive of this government's actions to get more women into rewarding careers in Australia's jobs of the future. Misha Schubert of the Science and Technology Australia organisation said that the new STEM scholarship program will pave the way for more women and girls to study science and technology. Carly Walker, the CEO of the Academy of Technology and Engineering, also welcomed the program, saying that increasing investment in STEM education and research translation will strengthen Australia's capacity to rebuild after COVID. And indeed, Michelle Gallagher, CEO of health data analytics company Opal, said that scholarships with the private sector are an excellent
Time
investment.
for the answer has expired. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And my question is to the Minister for National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds. I refer to the Australian Government's document entitled Australia's COVID-19 Vaccine Rollout, National Rollout Strategy. It was available on the Department of Health's website. Can the minister confirm that page 2 of that document setting out the COVID-19 vaccine national rollout strategy, aged care and disability care staff are listed under phase 1A?
Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can confirm that. And as I said in my previous answer, for the majority, the 270,000 workers, they are in 1B, and it is possible that a number of workers who work in residential aged care were vaccinated as part of the aged care rollout.
Order. Senator O'Neill, a supplementary question. Order. Senator O'Neill.
Somebody Google. Google.
Order. Senator O'Neill is on her feet. Order. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Reynolds, despite now being given multiple opportunities to correct the record, the minister has continued to insist that she's correct when she says disability support workers were classified in 1B. Will this minister now correct the record?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And as I've said, there were some workers who were in 1A, and I've said that's exactly right. But the majority is in 1B. The majority of the 270,000 workers and their support staff and care workers are in 1B.
Senator O'Neill, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Order. Senator Watt.
When the minister herself doesn't even understand the Morrison government's COVID-19 vaccine rollout to disability support workers, and she has no idea how many disability support workers have been fully vaccinated, how can Australians living with a disability and their families possibly trust this minister to protect them?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I stand by what I said, and that is that we are now rolling out through 5 channels vaccinations for workers, for participants, and also for support workers, and also for their carers. It is true that in 1A, some of the workers who work in either residential aged care or disability homes may have been vaccinated, but the majority now have the opportunity to get vaccinated at their convenience through 5 different methods.
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.